Nam Savaj Srimad Bhagavatam Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, ISKCON Govardhana Ki Jai, Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Gopamanandi. All glories to some devotees, all glories to some devotees, all glories to some devotees, all glories to Shigo and Shiganga. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, text number 12. Hadina lila haste chanala sad Prubanga samuchita bhuyanugraham Acheta chinta mayamena misvadam Yavam manodharano yavastite Hidina, very magnanimous. Lila, pastimes. Hasita, smiling. Ikshana, by glancing over. Ulasat, glowing. Prubanga, signals of the eyebrows. Samsuchita, indicated. Puri, extensive. Anugraham, benediction. Ekchita, one must concentrate on. Chintamayam, transcendental. Enam, this particular. Isvaram, the Supreme Lord. Yavat, as long as. Manahat, the mind. Dharanaya, by meditation. Avistate, can be fixed. Translation, Translation, the Lord's magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glancing of his smiling face are all indications of his extensive benedictions. One must therefore concentrate on this transcendental form of the Lord as long as the mind can be fixed on him by meditation. Please repeat. The Lord's magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glancing of his smiling face are all indications of his extensive benedictions. One must therefore concentrate on this transcendental form of the Lord as long as the mind can be fixed on him by meditation. It's quite a long purport. Purport by Srila Prabhupada in Bhagavad Gita 12.5. It is said that the impersonalist undergoes a series of difficult programs on account of his impersonal meditation, but the devotee, due to the Lord's personal service, progresses very easily. Impersonal meditation is therefore a source of suffering for the impersonalist. Here, the devotee has an advantage over the impersonalist philosopher. The impersonalist is doubtful about the personal feature of the Lord, and therefore he always tries to meditate upon something which is not objective. For this reason, there is an authentic statement in Bhagavatam regarding the positive concentration of the mind on the factual form of the Lord. The process of meditation recommended herein is Bhakti Yoga, or the process of devotional service after one is liberated from the material conditions. Jnana Yoga is the process of liberation from the material conditions. After one is liberated from the conditions of material existence, i.e. when one is nivritta, as previously stated herein, or when one is freed from all material necessities, one becomes qualified to discharge the process of Bhakti Yoga. Therefore, Bhakti Yoga includes Jnana Yoga, or in other words, the process of pure devotional service simultaneously serves the purpose of Jnana Yoga. Liberation from material conditions is automatically achieved by the gradual development of pure devotional service. These effects of Bhakti Yoga are called Anatta Nivritti. Things which are artificially acquired gradually disappear along with the progress of Bhakti Yoga. Meditation on the lotus feet of the Personality Godhead, the first processional step, must show its effect by anatta nivritti. The grossest type of anatta, which binds the conditioned soul in material existence, is sex desire, and this sex desire gradually develops in the union of the male and female. When the male and female are united, the sex desire is further aggravated by the accumulation of buildings, children, friends, relatives, and wealth. When all these are acquired, the conditioned soul becomes overwhelmed by such entanglements, and the false sense of egoism, or the sense of myself and mine, becomes prominent, and the sex desire expands to various political, social, altruistic, philanthropic, and many other unwanted engagements resembling the foam of the sea waves, which become very prominent at one time and in the next moment vanishes as quickly as the cloud in the sky. The conditioned soul is encircled by such products as well as products of sex desire, and therefore Bhakti Yoga leads to gradual evaporation of the sex desire, which is summarized in 3 headings, namely profit, adoration, and distinction. All conditioned souls are mad after these different forms of sex desire, and one shall see for himself how much he has been freed from such material hankerings based primarily on the sex desire. As a person feels his hunger satisfied after eating each morsel of foodstuff, he must similarly be able to see the degree to which he has been freed from sex desire. The sex desire is diminished along with its various forms by the process of Bhakti Yoga, because Bhakti Yoga automatically, by the grace of the Lord, effectively results in knowledge and renunciation, even if the devotee is not materially well educated. Knowledge means knowing things as they are, and if by deliberation it is found that there are things which are not at all unnecessary, naturally the person who has acquired knowledge leaves aside such unwanted things. When the conditioned soul finds by culture of knowledge that material necessities are unwanted things, he becomes detached from such unwanted things. This stage of knowledge is called vairagya, or detachment from unwanted things. We have previously discussed that the transcendentalist is required to be self-sufficient and should not beg from the rich, blind persons to fulfill the bare necessities of life. Sukadeva Goswami has suggested some alternatives for the bare necessities of life, namely the problem of eating, sleeping, and shelter. But he has not suggested any alternative for sex satisfaction. One who has the sex desire still with him should not at all try to accept the renounced order of life. For one who has not attained to this stage, there is no question of a renounced order of life. So, by the gradual process of devotional service under the guidance of a proper spiritual master and following the principles of Bhagavatam, one must be able to at least to control the gross sex desire before one accepts the renounced order of life factually. So purification means getting free gradually from sex desire, and this is attained by meditation on the person of the Lord as described herein, beginning from the feet. One should not try to go upwards artificially without seeing for himself how much he has been released from the sex desire. The smiling face of the Lord is the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and there are many upstarts who at once try to begin with the 10th canto, and especially with the 5 chapters which delineate the Ras Leela of the Lord. This is certainly improper. By such improper study or hearing of Bhagavatam, the material opportunists have played havoc by indulgence in sex life in the name of Bhagavatam. This vilification of Bhagavatam is rendered by the acts of the so-called devotees. One should be freed from all kinds of sex desire before he tries to make a show of recital of Bhagavatam. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur clearly defines the import of purification as cessation from sex indulgence. He says, Jitayata discha sujati vishaya lampatyam chaijati tata dayayed iti chitta sudi taratamyanaiva jana taratamyam uktam. And as one gets free from the intoxication of sex indulgence by purification of intelligence, one should step forward for the next meditation, or in other words, the progress of meditation on the different limbs of the transcendental body of the Lord should be enhanced in proportion to the progress of purification of the heart. The conclusion is that those who are still entrapped by sex indulgence should never progress to meditation above the feet of the Lord. Therefore, recital of Srimad Bhagavatam by them should be restricted to the first and second cantos of the great literature. One must complete the purificatory process by assimilating the contents of the first 9 cantos. Then one should be admitted into the realm of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. You get all that? Amganatamantashagananjana salakya chakshuvanchamtina tasme shive namaha. Very good purport for one who wants to be a sannyasi. So there was one devotee, just can't think of his name, but he became known as Chaitanya Das. He lived in Navadvip area, but he was travelling. He had doing some travelling. He was coming back home, and he was in travelling through. Where did Lord Chaitanya have his hair cut? What was that place called? Katwa. He was travelling through Katwa, and he heard that Lord Chaitanya was there. And not only was he visiting there, he was actually taking sannyas, and he was getting his hair shaved off. And everybody was lamentating so much. Why does he have to take sannyas? Why does he have to cut his beautiful long hair? And even the barber was saying, "This is the last time I ever cut hair like that." He was lamenting, "Why is it me that has to do it?" And Lord Chaitanya said, "You're a barber, do your duty." So anyway, so this devotee, when he heard afterwards, the spiritual master was giving Lord Chaitanya's name, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, just that name stuck in his mind. Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. And all the way back home, he was just in complete ecstasy, tears pouring from his eyes, and constantly chanting Sri Krishna Chaitanya. So when he arrived to his home, his family was asking, "So how was the visit? What's the news?" And all he could say was Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. And his mood of ecstasy caught on to his wife and his family members, and they were just lying on the ground crying and holding onto his feet, also chanting Sri Krishna Chaitanya. So if your family life is like that, there's no need to take sannyas. You're already perfect. But anyway, nevertheless, Prabhupada has given these instructions. So, of course, for most people in this world, to chase after fulfilling sex desire is the goal in life. The 4 principles of material life: eating, intoxication, meat eating, gambling, illicit sex. Although from the sastric point of view, these are the pillars of sinful life. For the materialist, these are the goals to achieve. These are the things that everyone is running after. So of the 4, trying to satisfy this sex desire, because it is considered the highest pleasure, therefore it becomes the tightest shackle that binds us to this material world, because to be able to become free, detached from the material world, we need to become free from our material desires. And that strongest material desire is that sex desire. However, sometimes it's misunderstood. What is that nature of sex desire? Where does it come from? Generally, or quite often, we may be thinking it's coming from the body because we've got a material body. Therefore, we're identifying with the material body, and then naturally we get attracted to the opposite sex, and that's where we're meditating on the objects of sense gratification. We hear from Bhagavad Gita that verse, Jyoto Visham Pumshaha Sankas Teshu Pajayate Sankat Sanjayate Kama Kvota Pajayate, that by contemplating the objects of the senses, in other words, contemplating all the sources of enjoyment, so-called enjoyment in the material world, one develops attachment for them. And by such attachment, lust arises, but because you can never fulfill that lust, therefore anger always arises. It is said that anger is the younger brother of lust. Where you get one, you always get the other. But this nature of sex desire arising from this lust, it actually it's understood that it's actually inherent within the soul. It's not that, okay, we get rid of the material body and there's going to be no more sex desire. The sex desire is inherent within the jiva itself. And Prabhupada mentions in the purport to the very first verse of the Bhagavatam 111, he mentions that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti specifically deals with the original and pure sex psychology, or adiras, devoid of all mundane inebriety. The whole material creation is moving under the principle of sex life. In modern civilization, sex life is the focal point for all activities. Wherever one turns his face, he sees sex life predominant. Therefore, sex life is not unreal. Its reality is experienced in the spiritual world. The material sex life is but a reflection of that original fact. The original fact is in the absolute truth, and thus the absolute truth cannot be impersonal. Consequently, man without information of the actual spiritual form of sex has accepted material sex life as the all in all. However, there is a distinction between sex life in the material condition and spiritual sex life. So, this adiras that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions is this Haladini Shakti personified by Srimati Radharani. This is the energy which Krishna enjoys his pastimes through the agency of Srimati Radharani. And so, when we engage in devotional service, we are connecting with that same Haladini Shakti. As we progress spiritually, that Haladini Shakti slowly starts to manifest within the heart. And because we're getting that higher taste, the lower taste of material sense gratification slowly begins to dissipate. However, from being originally in the spiritual world, in our pure spiritual position, if we falling down into the material world, when that pure love connects with the mode of passion, it's transformed into lust, material lust. So therefore, trying to enjoy that pure sex desire in the material world manifests through this mundane sex desire, which is everybody is, to one degree or another chasing after, trying to fulfill. But it should be understood based on Prabhupada's writings that there is a pure sex desire there, that's like the position that we're trying to regain. So we can analyse ourselves in this connection. Do we have a Hanuman-like heart or a Ravana-like heart? So what is the difference?
So what is Hanuman? What was one of his main objectives in the Ramayana? We most of us are familiar with that. What was one of Hanuman's main objectives? Yes, but in what specific way? To bring Sita back. Yes, to rejoin the energy with the energetic. That was Hanuman. Okay, but Ravana, what was he trying to do? He was trying to enjoy Sita separately. So Hanuman was the perfect devotee. He was trying to rejoin, like Radha Krishna or Sita Ram or Lakshmi Narayan, trying to bring the energy to the energetic. Of course, it's not that we have to be Hanuman jumping over the ocean and fighting all the asuras. We can just bring them together by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. In this way, we're bringing the energy and the energetic together. So in this way, we're purifying that sex desire by enjoying through the amorous pastimes of Radha and Krishna. And I think as the Krishna book mentions, that to overcome material sex desire, we can hear about the amorous pastimes of Radha and Krishna. And that purifies that mundane sex desire and brings it up to that adiras, that level that we come in contact with that Haladini Shakti or Srimati Radharani's blessings. However, Ravan, he was trying to enjoy Sita separately. In other words, he's trying to enjoy the material world, trying to enjoy material sex desire through the agency of Sita. So Hanuman is famous for being such a great devotee of Ram, but Ravan, he goes down in history as being a great demon. He was vanquished by Ram for his heinous act in trying to separate, the Supreme Lord's consort like that. So we can analyse how much of our heart is Hanuman and how much of our heart is Ravan. Like that. Are we trying to enjoy the material world? Or are we trying to bring the energy and the energetic back together, trying to bring Radha and Krishna, Sita Ram, Lakshmi Narayan back together like that? So that's the ultimate goal. And as I said, very simple for us, just by chanting the Lord's names, we're reconnecting the two together. So, it's also mentioned here, because all these different verses, Sukadeva Goswami is mentioning about how to meditate on the form of the Lord, how to understand that the Lord has a personal form. So he sort of starts from the very beginning, trying to understand the universal form of the Lord and seeing different features of the Lord's body within that. But as the Sukadeva Goswami, he progresses, he comes more and more revealing the personal form of the Lord more. So here we have a description of the Lord's magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glancing with smiling face. So just to have pastimes, to have a smiling face, obviously means there has to be a form. You can't have a smiling face without a form. So many, or most of the other religious traditions we hear, you say, you talk about, the form of the Lord, and immediately they say, well, nobody's ever seen God, And, if you're speaking someone from the Islam tradition, they say he doesn't have a form, and they get very angry that you're trying to say, to them it's completely blasphemous to talk about the Lord's actually got a form. But still, at the same time, they're saying that he's the one who's creating, he's the one who's maintaining, etc. So how does someone do that without a form? That they don't seem to be able to answer. But nevertheless, for us, we understand he has a form. And it is that form whenever we see the deities. I mean, deity worship is such a powerful
process by which we can understand that Krishna has a form. Because sometimes we get people also perhaps coming from the Hindu tradition, and they say, yes, the deity form is manifesting from the Brahman, or something similar, like the Brahman, even though the Brahman is described, like the Brahman is the effulgence of the all-pervading effulgence of Krishna, and is described as having no qualities, no form, no activities, but still somehow or other people seem to think that everything is coming from the Brahman, that the Brahman is creating, it's manifesting, and Krishna, the form of Krishna, if they accept the form of Krishna, it's coming from the Brahman also. So, and that's very deep-rooted. This idea is very deep-rooted, particularly in India, where, so many of these impersonalist sort of Mayavadis, they're preaching this idea. But we're very fortunate we're actually hearing that, yes, the Brahman is a valid manifestation of the Lord, but it's not the ultimate. Just as in, sometimes the description is given looking at the sun. You have the sun god, the sun planet, and the sun's rays. So the sun's rays is that Brahman. But if you simply think that the sun is only the sun's rays, you're not fully understanding the complete, manifestation of the sun. So similarly, the effulgence, the Brahmajyoti, is a manifestation of Krishna, but it is not the full understanding. So next you have the localized aspect, Paramatma, Krishna within the heart, and then you have Sri Krishna Bhagavan, the original manifestation of Krishna from which everything is coming. So this verse says, one must therefore concentrate on this transcendental form of the Lord as long as the mind can be fixed on him by meditation. So this jhana, or meditation, of course the recommended process in this age is chanting the holy name, just simply trying to meditate. Very difficult in this age. We have rascal minds that can't focus on things for very long, and so many distractions, but by chanting we're able to meditate on the sound of Krishna's name, that sound vibration. With the beads, we're using the tactile sense, and we're seeing the deities, smelling the incense, etc., etc. All the senses are engaged in that meditation. So even though Kali Yuga is considered the most darkest fallen age, but at the same time we're given the easiest process. Before this meditation, Satya Yuga, practically everybody was more or less, naturally Brahmanically inclined. They could meditate for long periods. After that was fire sacrifice, then deity worship, but now it's Harinam Sankirtan. So simply by chanting, dancing, taking prasad, we've been given the easiest process. So along with this understanding the form of the Lord, in the Krishna book, in the chapter Prayers of the Demigods to Krishna within the womb, I'll just paraphrase it here a little bit, but mention that, dear Lord, you appear in your eternal transcendental form for the benefit of the living entities so that they can see you face to face and offer their worshipable sacrifices by ritualistic performance of the Vedas. Mystic meditation and devotional service are recommended in the scripture. Dear Lord, if you did not appear in your eternal transcendental form full of bliss and knowledge, a form which can eradicate all kinds of speculative ignorance about your position, then all people would simply speculate about you according to their respective modes of nature. And just going on, the appearance of Krishna is the answer to all imaginative iconography of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everyone imagines the form Supreme Personality of Godhead according to his mode of material nature. So in the Brahma Samhita it is said that the Lord is the oldest person. Therefore, a section of religionists imagine that God must be very old. And therefore they depict a form of the Lord like a very old man. But in the same Brahma Samhita, that is contradicted. Although he's the oldest of all the Indis, he has eternal form as a fresh youth, Navayovanam. So according to one's particular mode of nature or, conditioning, if one even gets to the point of understanding there may be a God, what sort of form, according to so many different influences, they may be speculating in different ways. But of course we don't need to speculate. The real description is given in Sastra, and we can see the manifestation of those descriptions given to us in the form of the deities. But I remember years ago Tamal Krishna Maharaj said he was speaking to one cardinal in the Philippines, and he was asking, so how do you imagine, or what do you think of the form of God? And the cardinal replied, I see God as a flame. That was his realization, that God was just a flame, a burning candle. So according to one's, basically speculative understanding, everybody's thinking differently. And we have those, I think it was Michelangelo, the artist, he painted on the roof of the Sistine Chapel, very famous painting, but he depicted God as an old man with a long white beard. So, because as mentions here, that we hear that God's the oldest, therefore he must be an old man, but the logical connotation of that is he's getting older, his beard's getting longer, and then he eventually dies. That's a connotation of someone who's old, under the influence of age. But with Krishna, he's always depicted as a youthful boy, Navayovanam, ever youthful. He never grows old. He was on the planet for 125 years, and he always remained as a beautiful young boy. So with that understanding, we can focus on the form of the Lord in that way. We don't have to speculate or try to understand maybe like this or maybe like that. And in this way, by meditating on the form of the Lord, by chanting Krishna's name, engaging in devotional service, etc., we're able to overcome these attachment to the material world, namely, as Prabhupada stresses, this with this sex desire becomes the strongest shackle. So slowly these attachments will be burnt away, dissipated through the fire of devotional service, and in that way we're able to reconnect ourselves with this Adi Ras, with this Haladini Shakti, and meditate on Radha and Krishna's pastimes. So Prabhupada, he ends, the conclusion is that those who are still entrapped by sex indulgence should never progress to the meditation above the feet of the Lord. So the feet of the Lord is also represented, as he mentions, the Canto 1 and 2 of Srimad Bhagavatam. They represent the lotus feet of the Lord. So he does mention also he mentions in the that purport of the first verse of Bhagavatam that unscrupulous persons go immediately to 10th canto, especially the 5 chapters which describe the Lord's rust dance. So everybody wants to hear about the amorous pastimes of Krishna, but most people aren't qualified to hear. The recommendation is start at the lotus feet, or start from the first canto, and then slowly work our way through. And the 10th canto is represented as Krishna's smiling face. So in this way we start at the beginning, following the order of the spiritual master, and this way we can slowly progress, and as we become more and more purified, eventually come into the 10th canto, become more qualified to enter into that, the amorous pastimes, the Ras Leela of Radha and Krishna. So Krishna also mentions, speaking to Arjuna in the third canto of Bhagavad Gita that Arjuna, he asked Krishna that, O descendant of Vishnu, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? So Arjuna, being very intelligent, he says, sometimes you're forced into doing something you know you shouldn't do it, but somehow or other you're just impelled to do it. So Krishna, he replies that it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion, and later transformed into wrath, which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So is transformed to passion, later transformed into wrath, so wrath or anger. So that lust can never be satisfied, and when there's unfulfilled desires, we become angry. And he goes on that lust, the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. So then he gives some hint where this lust is situated. He says the senses, the mind and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Therefore, through them lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. So, and then he gives the process to overcome this. He says, O Arjuna, in the very beginning curb this great symbol of sin, of lust, by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. So Prabhupada has given us the 4 regulative principles to regulate our daily activities and to control our mind and the daily program, the regular sadhana. And this way, slowly through practice and detachment, we can start to overcome the influence of this sin or lust, which Krishna says is the great all-devouring enemy of this world. So if one gets caught up in just trying to enjoy this material world, there's no depth at which a jiva can fall in degradation in this world if he allows himself through the influence of the mind. Because the material energy has 2 primary potencies, covering the intelligence of the jiva over and then pulling him down. So if one allows that, there's no, as I said, no depth to which a jiva can fall in his trying to satisfy that lust which burns like fire, which ultimately can never be satisfied. But through proper intelligence, if we uplift ourselves through daily spiritual sadhana, and Prabhupada says it's not difficult. He, in the Nectar of Devotion, again and again, he says just the standard daily processes of our spiritual program. That's all. We don't have to do anything special. Like I said, you don't have to be like Hanuman, fight all the asuras and rakshasas and jump over the ocean, etc. Just our daily standard activities is what's required. But we focus on that with all sincerity, and in this way we make steady advancement. Okay, well, in there, thank you very much. If there's any questions or comments? Yes, for them.
Thanks for your class, Thank you very much, class. So, one question is that Prabhupada stresses in the verse that one who's afflicted by sex desire shouldn't go beyond meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord, and he compares it to shouldn't go beyond the first and second cantos of the Bhagavatam. But then also Prabhupada says that the formula for becoming free from this lust, affliction from this lust, is to hear about the Rasa Leela pastimes of Krishna and the gopis. So this seems sort of contradictory.
Yeah, so I did comment on both. So therefore, out of Prabhupada's course's mercy, very early on, he gave us the Krishna book, the narration of the Krishna book, because it's so important to hear those pastimes So that's, Guru's mercy. He sort of lifted us up prematurely in a sense. That, okay, you've got the first and second canto, but I'm giving you a special bonus. But again at the same time, he did warn that one, shouldn't artificially enter into the pastimes thinking that's all in all. So therefore, in the Bhagavatam, we also hear about, creation. And creation of the universe and so many different things in the first few cantos, because they're just as important, they're activities of the Lord. But so starting off with the first canto, but slowly as you progress, the understanding is slowly you become purified. When you eventually get to the 10th canto, you are purified to have the proper understanding. Because the unscrupulous commentators, they're the ones who are trying to enjoy, they just see it as mundane sex life rather than the transcendental pastimes of Radha and Krishna. And that's why people listen to it, because they're just on the mundane platform. But as it says with the Krishna book, Prabhupada, by the mercy of the Guru, he's given us that special benediction. Yes, Manibhanda.
Thank you so much for the wonderful class. What a purport, huh? Just something that really struck me, actually just speaking to Rupa Raghunath Prabhu's point, there's a pastime with Prabhupada. He was staying at the Life Members' House in India. This was before we had our temples. And, he brought the first World Sankirtan party here in 1971. And this Life member and his wife kept on asking Prabhupada repeatedly, please talk to us about the pastimes of the Rasa Leela. And Prabhupada, would, no, please, Prabhupada, please. And he kept on going on and on about it. And finally Prabhupada said, I'm not qualified to speak about the intimate pastimes of Radha and Krishna. So that's kind of, of course, we had that infamous Gopi Bar club in the early days that Prabhupada, when he found out about it, put a complete, squash on that. So the point you were making about that gradual progression of studying Bhagavatam from the first canto, gradually leading up. And of course, having the summary study of the pastimes in Krishna book. And of course, as we read Krishna book, it's not just about Krishna's pastimes with the gopis, it's about the killing of the demons and all the other things. And just one thing I found really interesting there in the report, amongst the many other jewels there, was the subtle sex desire. Desire for, what was it, distinction, profit, and
adoration.
Adoration. So it's, one can perhaps control the more gross aspects of sex desire, but those other hidden things are much harder to root out.
No, it's true. Very good comments. Thank you. Yeah, it's one may be doing very nicely, and then they get the idea that yes, I'll travel around the world and speak about Krishna, and everybody will come and listen to me, and you're still affected by that subtle desire, fame, wealth, adoration. So it's always going to be there, but nevertheless, everything is resolved as we progress with our spiritual practices. So we come into this world with so much baggage, and but now our opportunity is to become purified and free of it. So just gradually, daily, on and on, we can progress, and slowly all these contaminations will disappear. Thank you. Anything else? Yes, Ru.
Seems to be like a lot of us went through the brahmachari, ashrams, some for a short time, some for a long time, but it seems to be maybe I'm not correct, maybe I'm correct, but it seems like there's that feeling that even though you may get married, because you've had that brahmacharya training, there's amongst some devotees there's that feeling that having children is maya, and it seems like some grihastas they get married but they never have children, and they avoid having children because they feel it's too entangling and it's maya. But then why are they getting married? So, but isn't it that okay, it may be entangling to a certain degree, but you can purify the entanglement by having children in Christian consciousness and trying to raise them to be devotees. And it also, isn't it, that it's having children, it's part of the purifying process, and then going through the whole package deal of having children, raising them. But, it's hard, it's difficult, and by the end you become purified from that desire. But if you don't go through that by having children, then maybe it's you're not going to become so detached.
Yeah. Well, there's a process of like a chain of events, if you like. You have the sex desire, and then comes children, and then responsibility, and then yajna. If you're performing your responsibility properly, that means there's some sacrifice, and Krishna says, I'm present wherever sacrifice has been performed. Okay, so if you're following the process properly and engage in sex desire to have children, and then your responsibility bringing them up and training them, obviously there's going to be some sacrifice, yajna, and that's the recommended way. But as soon as you break that chain, you're having sex not for children, that's just straight out lust, basically trying to satisfy the lust. But if you're having children and you're not bringing them up responsibility, they just become vanasankara, unwanted children. And there's no responsibility, therefore there's no yajna, and Krishna's not pleased. So the whole process has to be there. But individual grihastas, they need to decide, do they want children? If they're artificially trying to, no, we don't want children. I mean, there's so many, the only way a jiva can get liberated is to take birth in a human body, in a devotee's family. I remember my Guru Maharaj, once there was one Mataji saying, we're thinking we've got some children, we're thinking of having another child. And anyway, they were discussing like that. And my Guru Maharaj said, if I have to take birth again, I would be so happy to take birth as one of your children. Otherwise, how do I get liberated? So he was saying like that. So it's a grihasta's responsibility to produce Krishna-conscious children, so in that way they can become liberated, But I mean, you can say, is it artificial? Is that maya? I mean, that's up to the individual. That's a little bit not really sastra like that. But nevertheless, some choose just for company rather than children. So everybody's on a different platform. Yeah, so I don't know if that covers that. But yeah, just one last question.
Speaking to that point, Prabhupada said that a marriage without children is like a tree without fruit. So unless for some reason you cannot have children, or unless you marry very late in life, where having a child at 45 is not really a viable option. But, when you're young and healthy, the idea is that you follow the regulative principles and you bring children, as you were saying, and train them up. So that's true marriage.
Yeah. And it's also said, I think Prabhupada said, a woman doesn't become beautiful until she's had a baby. So Vedas covers everything. Okay, thank you very much. Prabhupada ki jai.